covered bedtime. Good morning, everyone. We ready to begin?
Yes.
Good. So welcome to the Coleman Oaks Thrift Store and Coffee Shop presentation today. We're so excited that you're here. I'm so excited. I'm going to pray for us and then just give a very short background of kind of what's led us to be where we're at today. And then I'm actually going to turn it over to people that know far more about all this than I do. Because we have a team of people that have been working hard. I'm pointing to them, but there's others in this room as well, but have been working hard on this. And so I'm just going to start us off. So let's pray as we go into this time. Lord God, thank you for this day. Thank you, Lord, for leading us as a church to continue to look for ways that we can step out in faith with you, to expand ministry, to expand our service to the world, and to build connections of faith with others. That our prayer always, Lord, is that more and more people come to know your love and that we are a blessing to the world around us. So bless this time, Lord. I pray that you'll give Jonathan, Jan, myself clarity in speech, and that if there's questions or thoughts on anybody's heart, Lord, help them to all come out today and help us to talk through those. And also, I pray, Lord, that we would continue just to catch your vision for ministry. In Christ's name, amen. So we are at a place right now that we are getting ready to move to the next stage of our what's now called the Coleman Oaks Thrift Store and Coffee Shop. And just to give you a very short background, 4 years ago in the spring of 2020, we became our own congregation. New Covenant launched us as our own church, and we became our own congregation. And and there was a little thing going on during that year. What was it? It didn't affect us that much, but COVID. So we actually became a church, our own congregation, in the middle of COVID. So we weren't even meeting, but God started blessing us, and as we started growing as a church, one of the very first things we did is we set up a team and we started working on our own vision of who God was calling us to be at Lake Deaton. And one of the things that God put clearly on us during that time is that we are called to be a congregation of hospitality, of welcoming, of working hard to welcome everyone, but also that we're called to be a missional congregation and to go out and take risk-taking mission and outreach to serve the world. Well, it was during that time that we were working in that process that Jan McCoy and Ed Lavera came to our trustees team, and they were both on the board of Bargains and Blessings. And out of that board, it was actually suggested to them that we should look at starting our own thrift store because they were getting so much stuff and were overwhelmed. And they said, you guys should do this. You should launch your own thrift store. And our trustees talked about it for a couple months and actually came to the decision that a thrift store is an amazing idea. It generates resources for mission and outreach. It's a great way to connect with community, to bless people in need. So they loved all the ideas, but they realized that it wasn't the right time. We were in the middle of a vision process of trying to understand our vision. We were still in COVID. We still weren't fully meeting as a congregation. And we didn't know, what Lake Deaton was going to be yet. So we said it's not the time. But the trustees were unanimous in support. They just weren't unanimous on the time. In fact, they were unanimous that it wasn't the right time. So a year ago, this January, they came back to us, or they came back to me. This time it was Jan and Juliana Davis. And again, it came out of their involvement at Bargains and Blessings. And they had been in a meeting. And again, they had said, you guys should look at doing this again. And so we started talking about it, and we said, this may be the time. And so we put together a task team to look at that, and they actually, Bargains and Blessings was very open with us on sharing records and different things. And during the next couple months, we realized this is the time, and we think it's something that God's calling us to move into. So last spring in March, we had a congregational vote, a church conference, they call it, Methodist Church. Who was here for that? So a lot of you were here. We voted almost unanimous. If I remember right, we had 3 people that were not for it. Everybody else, like 120 people, were in favor of moving ahead. And so we moved ahead, and our lead team put a new leadership team together, a launch team to start working on that Jonathan Baker and Jan McCoy are co-chairs of, and have worked hard this last year to get to the place where we're at right now. And this is an exciting place, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, who's going to continue and lead us through that.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. As Jim mentioned, there was a new team that was put into place after the congregational vote, and I'd like for those team members that are here to please stand so that you can know who they are. And just say your name. I think we can hear each other well enough. Speak up.
I'm Jim Hall. Mike Berger.
Okay, and Jonathan Baker, and there are several others, and it's a wonderful team because they represent a cross-section of people who've got construction experience and interior design experience, business experience, so they've really brought a wealth of knowledge to the table. And a lot of them have been involved in thrift shop ministry over the years, so it's made a huge difference. That team, as we came together, began to do its work. And one of the first things that we did was to ask ourselves an important question: why would we want to do a thrift shop? What's the purpose of a thrift shop? What value would it bring to our mission and ministry here? Because we know the amount of work that it would bring, but what difference would it make? And so we did a little bit of that visioning, and I want to ask Jan to come forward now and to share with you some of that, because it's the foundation for everything that we're going to share about how we can make that happen. But it's without understanding that foundation, we lose a lot of the true meaning of this program.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, everyone. We've spent a lot of time talking about making sure that our focus is where it needs to be. And Jim has been very clear from the beginning that it's not about the money, it's about the mission. And so we wanted to clearly define what is it that we hope to accomplish with this project. So you see up on the screen, we have come up with a mission statement. And I'd like to ask all of you to sort of read this with me, if you would. Coleman Oaks Thrift Store and Coffee Shop is an outreach ministry of Lake Deaton United Methodist Church, seeking to live out our mission statement in being a Christ-centered community, worshiping and serving together and apart, where the welcome is warm, faith grows, love becomes action, and lives are changed. And we feel very strongly that this thrift store is going to accomplish all of those goals. We have an outreach ministry is Lake Deaton's heartfelt way to assist in making life better for those in need in our surrounding community and the world. And we are very fortunate in the area where we live, but very, very near us in the surrounding communities, there is an incredible amount of need, which we feel we're going to really be able to address when we have this store. It focuses upon relationships, and that's a key word here, shifting from doing ministry for people to doing ministry with people.
Jan, let's go ahead and pass these out now, because some of you may have a little distance vision issue. This is a packet of material that you're going to receive. Each of you can have one for today. If you're here as a couple, as a family, when you leave, if you could just take one and leave the other on the table, it would be helpful for stewardship. But there's more information in here than we're going to discuss today, because there's the detail in here that if you want to take time to look at that after this, you're welcome to do. But what we're going to be referring to is in there somewhere, so if you have trouble seeing it on the screen, you can find it in the paper.
And I'm referring to, this is the first page, I believe, in the packet. If you turn that over, That's where we are talking about the mission statement. And then we wanted to define as clearly as we could the purpose of what it is that we want to accomplish. And we have defined actually 5 purposes for this project. And the first one is to provide a personal and spiritual outreach for Lake Deaton in the community. And I think Jim has been very clear on this for quite a long time, that it's not what we do within this building. It's not what we do within in the walls, but what we do outside those doors. And this is an excellent example of how we're going to be able to reach out this congregation into the world outside. We want to provide an opportunity to express God's care and love through a second chance team trained to help individuals and families in crisis and to connect them with resources within our church and community. Bargains and Blessings has a wonderful program called Family Interface. And this is for the very, very needy people who come in not to shop, but because they have such great needs. And there are many, many, many stories of how we have been able to assist people that really were desperate in many different ways. A personal story that I remember several years ago, we had a lady that came in who had 4 children, and they were living in a car. And she had been able to arrange an apartment, but had absolutely nothing to put into this apartment. And we were able to help her in many different ways, clothing for the children, literally pots and pans and dishes for the kitchen, furniture, and so on, at no cost to her. And so that's going to be a really big piece of what this ministry is about. It will provide a revenue source to support the mission work and the ministries of Lake Deaton. And that is how this thrift store in the structure, which I believe Jonathan will talk a little more about in a minute, but it will be under missions and outreach. That is the whole goal of what we are wanting to accomplish through the thrift store work. Provide a receiving facility for people to donate goods, clothing to help people in the surrounding communities. We all know when you move to the villages, you bring too much stuff. And then everybody says, well, now what are we going to do with it? And it is true that Bargains and Blessings just has been drowning in donations because of the generosity of the people in this area. And we fully expect, with the new growth in the South, as we all know, is exploding down there, that we're going to probably very quickly be drowning in donations as well. And then we want to provide an opportunity for people to volunteer. This is a really, really wonderful, fun way to volunteer and to be able to give back to those for many different reasons. It becomes a family. We have a lot of fun. It is hard work, but we have a lot of fun. And so we see this also as an opportunity to be able to volunteer through this ministry. I do want to go back a little bit to the Family Interface Second Chance idea. And one of the other things that we do want to provide is that we want to create networking with other resource services in the area, so that it's not just giving a handout, if you want to call it that, but to be able to actually provide support services, link them up with different agencies that are here in the area to help in whatever specific needs they might have, and that will be done through that specific ministry. We have in our design in the building provided an office. It will be in the intake area. It won't be out in the front of the store, so that there is some privacy and some dignity for the people that do come in. We'll have people that will be trained to work in that ministry and to work with the people who do come to present their needs to us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jan. By the way, throughout this presentation, if you have any questions, raise your hand. You can write questions down. We'll address them later. But if you have a question, and raise your hand so we can get a microphone to you. This is actually being taped today because we want the online community to be able to also hear what's happening. So just raise your hand if you have a question. Anybody at this point? Okay. So the question becomes then, if this is the purpose that we believe God has given to us, how do we get there? How do we make this happen? And the financial reality of making this happen, the goal is between 1.9 and 2.2 million dollars. You can throw that up. There you go. And that includes all of the expenses from the land to the preparation of the land, to the construction costs, to the pre-construction and construction costs. And it includes 6 months of operating expenses. We believe we needed to put that into the budget, knowing that when you start a business, you don't always start the revenue like you would at the end of that particular year, and we didn't want to make the cash flow a difficult time, so we put that into that budget. As we talk about the financial piece of it today, I want to underline it with 2 basic principles. One is that this team has been very conservative in estimating income from the thrift shop, and it's been very liberal in estimating expense, in hopes that what we share with you is an accurate picture, and in fact, it's a picture that is really going to be more favorable in the end than what we're sharing with you. So just keep that in mind as we share the rest. So why is it important to do this and to do it now? At that meeting, if some of you were at that first meeting, we decided that we would go ahead and move forward with the thrift shop, put a team together. But it was stated that we didn't want to move forward until we'd raised all of the money before we actually did the construction. At that meeting, maybe somebody seated here, said, "Have you ever thought about asking the members to invest rather than contribute?" And so we took that to task, and we did a lot of planning, a lot of talking, a lot of communication with a variety of other churches and other organizations that had done this. And through the first couple of months of our time together, we began to see that it was very clear that we needed to move as quickly as possible on this, and that investment was the way in which that could happen. So here's how we got to that decision. The sooner that we can open a thrift shop, the sooner that an amazing amount of revenue becomes available. At the end of the first year, you can see we have an initial projection of income over expense of about $300,000. In the budget, it's actually $293,000 something, but about $300,000 of what you might call profit, income over expense. That would be used initially to pay off any debt that we had, but eventually that is used for mission and ministry. That's money that we never would have had. If there is no growth over that 3-year period, no growth whatsoever in terms of income, we will still have raised over $1 million in income over expense in 3 years. Okay? Income over expense. Make sure you understand what I'm talking about. This is basically a profit margin. In the 5-year period, that figure would be around $2 million. That's with little or no growth. And we're going to show you the detail in a minute about that. And then in addition to that, if we waited for 3 years, we started looking at what construction costs would be in 3 years from now. And when we looked at what income we would lose and construction costs and how much we would be paying, it became a no-brainer. How can we do this? How can we do this now without putting the church under a lot of pressure, and particularly putting its members out of a lot of pressure? We think we came up with what could be a win-win situation for our members, for the church, and then for the larger community. I want you to see this. This is how we predicated a lot of our estimates. This is the actual from Bargains and Blessings, and they've been very gracious to open their books to us completely. They want this to work for us. In 2022, this is the ending year report for Bargains and Blessings. Total income, total expense, and then the net asset. That's the income over expense. So what was their net asset in 22? See what it is? Can you read? 767,000, almost 6. Okay, and that was an average monthly. Their average monthly income to make that was 98,000. You can see the average monthly income. Their average net income was $63,000 a month. You know what it was last year? Anybody know? $1.2 million. That was their net asset, $1.2 million. So when you look at how we figured our budget and how we could arrive at this, it will make a little bit of sense to you. Obviously, we can't we can't be certain of what we would make, but we low estimated what we think we would make. So if you look at year one on the right-hand box there, we're anticipating a monthly revenue starting at $30,000 and moving by the end of the first year to $50,000 a month. And our yearly debt retirement would be somewhere around $300,000. Just find out where we are. You can drill into these details later. But if we increase the income just slightly over a 5-year period at $10,000 per month increments, and we also are increasing our expenses in this budget by 20% each year, much more than they will be. So high expense, low income projection. We're looking at about a $2 million debt retirement at the end of 5 years. We think that will be much sooner than that, but that's the projection. And that's based on bargains and blessings. Now, if you can remember back to that original, at that point in time in 22, they were averaging about $100,000 a month. Last year, they averaged $110,000 a month. At the end of year 5, we're still at 80. We're still at $80,000. So we believe that's a very, very conservative income estimate because we have the same physical space, square footage, and we have a location that we feel is even better than where they would be located in terms of B&B with the ease of access getting in and out of there. Questions at this point? So that's how we came up with the financial realities. In other words, at the end of that, we went back to the lead team and to the finance resource team, shared all of this and said, we can do this. We can do this, and we need to do it sooner than later. So at that meeting back in April of 2023, last year, we had a piece of land that the group that had been doing the preliminary studies shared with us that we wanted to buy. We've quickly discovered that was not the lot that we could use for a number of reasons. One, size. Number two, had a building on it that had asbestos, and there were a bunch of other things that were precluding that particular land. So we started looking for other land, and let me just make a long story short. God intervened. We got land that wasn't even up for sale because somebody in Coleman knew somebody, and then we started making calls. Would you be interested? And it's kind of a God story, the way this all happened. We'd be glad to share that with you later, but God really worked to make this land available. And a 2.1 acre piece of ground right next to the other piece was made available. Not only did the team or the family say, yes, we'll sell it to you, but we'll also hold the financing for you, if that would help. So we were able to negotiate with them, and at the same time, you can see that there was a 0.4 acre parcel of ground at the very back of that land. Now, why would we need 0.4 acres? When we looked at the plot plan and what we wanted to do with our building, one of the things that you have to plan for is water retention. You have to build a water retention area for a commercial building. That 0.4 acres enables us to get 35 more parking spaces by just having that 0.4 acres and putting the water retention in the back there. And so for a very low price, we were able to purchase that. So we own now, you own these 2 parcels of land. We're still paying on the one, but we outright own these 2 parcels of land. And these are perfect for the design, for the schematic that we had in mind. So the land became available, and it became very apparent to us that if we didn't get this land now, we weren't going to get it. I mean, if you've been out there and seen what's happening around Coleman, land is just going like crazy, and we got in early enough that we were able to secure a really reasonable price for this land, and we're able to make that purchase. So this is where it's located, and Jim can give you better directions than I can. But I think the main thing to know is on 301. Anybody been to Coleman area? Know where this is? Jim, you want to give your description?
If you want to see the exact land, when you go to Coleman, you hit the stoplight, you turn left, go south. When you turn left, go south, about a block down, there's a hair salon on the right. You can't miss it. It's a big one. They have a big sign. Right after the hair salon, there's 3 houses in a row. 1, 2, 3. The third house is the original property that we looked at. So the third house. Right after the third house is an empty lot, lots of trees in it, and that's the lot that we've purchased. So it's right, the hair salon, 3 houses, empty lot. And on the empty lot is an old billboard sign that is falling apart. So when you get to the lot, bunch of trees, billboard falling apart, that's the property. And everybody should drive down after this meeting, take a little road trip, go check it out.
There'll be a new sign out there before too long, and we will. We actually will have a land dedication sometime in the spring as well. But location is important. I mean, if any of you know what's going on at Coleman, it's quite an expansion there. That 301 corridor is going to become a 4-lane highway, and then the bypass is going to move heavy traffic and things out of the industrial area all the way over to the turnpike. So it'll make that corridor much more welcoming for people to drive. And Coleman, the little sleepy town of Coleman, has an amazing master plan that they're beginning to unfold, which includes putting in a septic system. So we'll be able to hook in eventually to that, or sewer system. To that sewer system. We have water, but we don't have sewer. We have to have our own septic system. So any question about where the land is located? Yes?
Oh, sorry. So my question is, Bark is in Blessings right now, so the building is about the same square footage as what Bark is in Blessings has, which is very crowded. Is there any room on the property for expansion at some point?
Yes, there is. And there is expansion, and we'll get into that in a little more detail, but to this side of the building, there is room for another 3,000 square footage, and the current building design will house all the infrastructure for that addition. We're putting that into the first building. So when the second addition, 2 years from now, we have to do, we're convinced it'll be 2 years from now that we'll be doing another 3,000 square foot, that it'll be ready to do that. We don't have much more than that, but there are parcels of ground right next to us that we would need to be looking at, because that's a possibility of procuring those. We get this first phase done, then God can dream those dreams, and we'll have the revenue to do that if we can get through this first phase. Good question. Okay, moving right on. So how do we make this happen? We do it by allowing our members to invest, not to contribute. Get that past your mind. It's not asking you to contribute. This is an investment. If you have an investment somewhere right now, like if you have in the bank a CD, this is exactly what we're inviting you to consider doing here. We're offering what's called a capital revenue note. You'll see a picture of it in your packet. This is a picture of it right here. It's done on the same basis as a CD, or certificate of deposit. You have a certain term that you apply to it. It might be a 2-year term, or a 3-year term, or a 4-year term, and you're investing that term, and at the end of that term, you get your interest and your principal back. We're going to be offering 4%, which is slightly lower than the average CD rate in this particular area. And some of us know that's lower than some other investments that we may be making, but we would choose to sacrifice some of that in order to help the church make that dream a reality. So we offer this CD. It's a legal document signed by the trustees, our legal authorities and representatives, sealed and given to you or given to your financial advisor, because it's just like any other asset that you would have. So you're investing, loaning that money. You're going to get money back in return. You're helping the church build the building, and you're helping the church save somewhere about 3% maybe even more if we had to borrow it from a commercial lender, because their interest rate would be higher. So if you figure 3% saving on $2 million, you can figure that's a lot of money. So it's kind of we think as a win-win situation. And I want to ask Kevin if he'd come up here for a minute. Kevin has been one of the persons that heard this presentation in a smaller setting and shared some ideas with us that we thought had great resonance and made a lot of sense from a practical view. And so, Kevin, just give us your testimony.
I don't know if yeah, it's on. I just to kind of introduce myself. I'm a member of the church. My wife runs a harmony chorus here, meets here once a week. Somewhat of a mission for the church. Several of the members, there are a number of members that are members of that chorus. When I first first saw this plan, it really inspired me that this is kind of exactly what I think our church should be doing. We should be growing. We should be a better presence going south here. I think it's a wonderful idea. I was particularly, my wife worked at Bargains and Blessings as well, volunteered at Bargains and Blessings. I was particularly impressed with the idea of having this counseling service, if you will, for those that need it. It is a wonderful idea to be able to connect people with the right agencies, the right help, and so forth, not only to help them get kind of on their feet. My wife has stories too about people coming to Bargains and Blessings looking for a job interview, had no clothes to wear to a job interview. It's just such a wonderful mission for the local community. And ironically, in this business, it's one that you can make money at doing it. And so the idea to raise the money, I've been in the fundraising business for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for about 30 years. So I've talked to a lot of people about donating money. And every time I talk to sponsors to donate things for us to have an event or to raise more money, I always talk about a thing called what I refer to as leverage. I go to a sponsor and said, listen, if you give me 10 grand to run this golf tournament, I'll make $150,000 on the golf tournament. I can't run it without your $10,000. I can't get started without it, but I'll raise that kind of money. And the whole idea of leverage on your donation here is what really triggered me with how great an idea this is. What you're actually going to donate is whatever the difference is in what you're making on your investment today versus buying a CD. We all have we all have investments of some sort that are drawing us income. So yeah, we take a little bit less interest, but so let's take a $10,000 or a $1,000 example, however you want to do it to get it in round numbers. So if you had a $10,000 investment that was making you 7% today, this is going to make you 4%. So you're going to give up 3% on $10,000, which is a few $100s. That's what you're actually going to contribute. But the leverage to that is the church gets 10 grand to do this. And they get 10 grand to do this now, as opposed to a capital campaign where we would ask for donations and get enough money to get a mortgage and, blah, 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 blah. It'll take time. And in this case, I think time is money. I think the idea that we should do this now is the construction costs are going to go up. We don't want to miss the opportunity of a location. So what really inspired Joy and I to sign up for this is the idea that it's a fantastic mission for the church. It does exactly what we want to be doing. We want to be growing that way. And, you get such a leverage off of your contribution. Certainly, you can contribute your money, that always works. But this is a great way to have a win-win on both sides where your contribution gets leveraged considerably in the church being able to pull this off. So that's what got us hooked right away on it. So
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you. So the idea of a capital revenue note is it's based on simple interest. It's not a compounded interest. So here's an example that if you invest $20,000 for 3 years, you're going to earn $8,000 each year, $800 each year. So thank you for that. $800 for each year. So at the end of the 3 years, you would have earned $2,400 of interest. Okay, then with your principal, your payback would be $22,400. It's a simple interest. You don't get paid back until the end of the term. It's not every year. It's held until the end of that particular term. So it's a legal document, and it's important to understand that. So this is how the CRNs work. If you were to invest, you would receive a CRN, and you would determine the term. And at close to the time of the term comes due, about 60 days before the term comes due, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years, somebody from the church would contact you and say your investment's about to come due. And here are your options. And this is all in your document. There's a whole document of policies and procedures that has been gone over by our lawyers so that it's a legal document and knows what they're doing. You would be called and you said, would you be interested, number one, in reinvesting? Now, we'll only ask you that question if we had to have additional funds, because we're still in the repayment piece of that. If we don't need those additional funds, reinvestment is not going to be an option. We put that there for two reasons, primarily in a community like this. This is my third church where I've done this. It's been very successful at all three churches. This church is very unique. While my previous congregation was predominantly retirement, this is a retirement community. And people tend to be concerned about the longer-term investments because you're not quite sure what's going to happen, right? So one of the things that can happen, is that you might say, well, I'm not going to lock this up for more than 2 years. But then I'll be willing to reinvest in 2 years based on where I am at that particular moment. If you have to do that, then do it that way. The best would be, obviously, to have a 3 or 4 year. Now, why? Because it gives the thrift shop time to get into the revenue-producing mode so that we can begin to pay off these things in a systematic way. But we will work with you in any option. So the number one option is to reinvest. The second one is to receive 100% back of your loan and interest. No questions asked. That's what we would do. Third option would be to receive a payment of the loan and donate a part of that interest or all of that interest. Sometimes people will say, keep the interest. If you do that, then it becomes a donation to the church. The investment is not a donation. Please understand that. It will not show up on your year-end giving. It will show up on your paper as an investment, but it's not taxable because you're not donating it. You're investing it. Only the interest that you will receive. Another option is to donate any portion of the actual loan. If you feel that God has put that on your heart, that you may want to do that. We had several people in my previous congregations that did that because after 2 or 3 years, they've got to the point where they said, God has truly blessed us. We've made money during this period of time on our investments. This is what we want to do for the church. And we were able to pay down the mortgage much faster that way. But you have options. Everybody's going to be in a very different situation. So those are the ways that we need to do. Now, please pay attention to the last point. In the event of any hardship, no questions asked, the money is given back to you with the interest that you have accrued to date. Now, that's not like a bank. If any of you had a CD and had to take it out early, you know you're going to get penalized for that. There's a penalty for the withdrawal, and you don't get any of the interest back. But we're going to be the church and care for you in your time of hardship and give you back that principal and whatever interest you've accrued to that time. Okay? So how do we accomplish this? Well, we have a congregation that's a growing congregation. We have about 469 individuals or households that give between $1,200 and $50,000 a year. That doesn't include people that just give, come a few times a year, things of that nature. These are regular givers. And so we took that model and we said, well, what would people need to give in order to help us to raise the $2 million that we really wanted to raise? And so the categories that we came up here are kind of just estimates, but reasonably accurate estimates of what we believe the potential is there. What we like to say is we're not going to tell you what you need to give. Jim laughs about that because people are always asking him, what should I give? What you should give is what you're capable of giving in terms of investing in proportion to what God has given to you. Because you know that some people are not going to be able to do as much and some will be able to do more. So we did put a number on each one of those. We, for example, in the first category, which was a large category of 50,000 or more, we had the number 8. I think we're up to 4 now with a promise of the 5th one, I think, coming soon. So we've done really well at that category. But it's also the people who don't have those means who want to give $500 or invest $500 because we want everyone to participate. We're limiting it to $500, but we want to make it possible that if somebody wants to invest, be a part of it, that we'll do that. It's just the bookkeeping that is the time-consuming piece at that point. So you would need to make your own decision about what you think you can do. So here's where we are to date. You're not going to be able to see those, but I think it's in your packet. Let me just ballpark it and say that with all of the contributions and the CRNs that have already been invested and the promises that we have received, we're over $600,000 to date. So as we're just launching this now to the whole congregation, God has already blessed us with the reality that we're sitting about $600,000. So we had another $1.4 million to raise. But the real key to that is that only, get back to that, I can't get back to it, it's less than 40. Only 40 giving units have contributed so far. 40. So if you think of the 469 potential, that chart's based on 348, only 40 have contributed so far. We believe that God will enable us to raise all of this and keep us from having to go to a commercial lender. We can go to a commercial lender. We have talked to the foundation. They have agreed to support this because they know that thrift shops pay back their debts very quickly. But we don't want to do that because that's the difference between 4% and 6.5% of the interest rate. And we want to save that as much as possible and keep this in-house. Everybody participating means that it's a win-win situation. But if we don't raise enough money, we can go to the foundation if necessary. So there's a promise card in your packet. That's that little card that's on the other pocket with an envelope in it. This is really important because this is the only way that we can ascertain whether we're at a place where we can move forward full steam ahead and know whether we need to negotiate with a commercial loan lender or not. And it doesn't mean that you have to be prepared to contribute the actual investment money immediately. The promise might be that you'll do it by May 1 or whatever the date would be because you have to work with moving some investments around in order to make that happen. But it gives you a chance to put on that card your intent and how many years that you want to have that note, 2-year, 3-year, 4-year. We already have to, as you can imagine, we have to be dealing accurately with the financing of this. It's a big project for us. So we have to know what's the cash flow and what's going to be the payback and things of that nature. So this helps us to plan and really helps us to know how we can move forward with our contractors. what's really important on this promise card is that you put your legal name. It's the name that you would like to have on your CRN when the time comes that your check. The date of the CRN is dated when your check arrives. The date the check arrives at the church, that's the date that your CRN begins. Okay? The legal information is important because some of us will be giving out of trust. Some of us will be giving with two members of the family. That might be in your own legal documents so you need to make sure your legal name is on there, because that something were to happen to you, it becomes part of your state, and that needs to be legal. Does that make sense? Give great care to that in terms of what you put on there. We'll help you with that if you have any particular questions. But the promise card is really, really important, and we hope that you'll really hold that and pray about it. So here's the kind of the last fact that we want to give to you. Once the thrift shop is open, 100% of whatever is earned, income over expense, will go to debt retirement. Okay? 100% until the thrift shop debt is paid. We believe that's the best stewardship, to do this and get it paid. It'll be paid in the order of the highest interest. So we'll pay off the land, because that land that they're holding is 8%. And then we would pay off anything else that comes in over this 4%, and then we'll pay off our own members. But it's debt retirement. So until all of that debt is paid, 100% will go to that, except one exception, and that is when God blesses us and our estimate of what we will be able to do for debt retirement is exceeded, because income is significantly more than what we had projected. Then we want to tithe that immediately for mission and ministry here at Lake Teton for the community. Let me give you an example. The first year we budgeted $293,000 some odd dollars for net income over expense. Follow me? If God blesses us and we bring in $500,000 over, that's a $200,000 difference, right? We would tithe that 10%. So 10% of 200,000 is what? $20,000. That $20,000 would go to our outreach and mission, saying this is money that we didn't know we had. We need to figure out how God wants us to use it right now in this community. The other 90% goes into debt retirement. So you're paying off the debt retirement quicker. The second year, we have a budgeted amount, and we will budget that every year. So if we exceed the budgeted amount for that, that's the bonus, you might say, and that's what will be tithe. And that tithing is a way to model to our congregation that when God blesses us, it's not ours, it's God. So we want to give back to God a portion of that. And then eventually when all of the debt is paid, then all of the assets go between Lake Teton for mission and ministry and the thrift shop for mission and ministry through the mission and outreach ministry team. So it will be divided. We don't know exactly yet the percentage of that. The lead team is working on that, but we'll have that settled by the end of this year. So when we actually move into this, it'll be clear exactly what will happen. Okay, time for questions before we get into the schematic. Yes? Right. Okay, so the question was, when would you receive the money? What we would like to know as soon as possible, if it's possible for you to do this today, if you've already thought about it and talked about it, if not, take these home and pray about it and talk about it. We'd like to get the promise cards back within a week or so. The promise cards are the important thing. When the money will come will be based on what you have to do to move any assets to invest. There is a place on there that says date. What does it say? It says date to, should know this 100 times. There's a place that says date you plan to invest. date you plan to invest. So I had a person yesterday told me I've got a CD coming due in May. They're not going to reinvest that CD in the bank. They're going to reinvest it here. So May is what they put on here, May of 2024, and then the term. That's what you would do. If you're ready to do that and you can move those assets, then you attach a check with this and put it in the envelope and give it to the church at any time. And that's what that envelope is there for, friends. This is very confidential, very confidential. So when you complete, whether it's the promise card or promise card and cash check, put it in the envelope, put your name on it, and then put thrift shop and hand it into the office. It immediately goes to our finance office, and then they work with the rest of us.
Is the opportunity also there to layer an investment? So, for instance, if I want to do $30,000, could I do $10,000 on a 2-year and
Yes.
$10,000 on a 3-year, and that
Yep.
way?
I handed out 4 cards to somebody the other day for that very reason, because they wanted to layer it.
Right.
And they also had different funds they wanted to take it out of, this trust or that trust. So as many, whatever works for you, it's just bookkeeping for us, which we take seriously, but we'll work that out, yes. And it's also possible. Another question somebody had yesterday to me was, so if I hit this windfall, can I reinvest? Can I invest again? I said no. No, I didn't say no. I said yes. I said, yeah. I mean, it was a legitimate question, and they wanted to do something now what they believed they were capable of doing. But if their circumstances change, could they do a second investment? Absolutely, if the church needs it. Now, we're not going to take it if we don't need it, okay? Because we're not in that business. We're doing this for the purpose.
Yeah, you may have answered this already, but so if you make an investment versus the donation, is it still an investment, still like a tax write-off or tax deferment or anything like that?
Good. It's a good question. And we need to be clear on this. The investment is not a tax donation because it's not a donation to the church. And it will only become a donation to church if you donate it at the end of your investment term. Then it becomes a donation. That's when you receive the information that you've given this. And whenever whether it's interest or interest in principal, whatever it is, you get a 1099 form from the church that you use for your taxes to handle that. So yes, you cannot include it, which is why don't get angry at Connie when you get your report at the end of the year and it said, well, I invested X amount of dollars and it's not on my report. Well, it's not contribution. And she's only sending you a contribution because that's your legal document from the church that states this is what you have given for tax purposes. We're going to give you a separate indication at the end of the year saying this, but it will not fall under your contribution. It's not a contribution.
So Jonathan, as a follow-up, each year would we receive a statement saying we owe taxes on that interest?
No, only
So
at the end of the time.
So it's just when you mature and take the certificate out.
Only
with
at
interest?
maturity, right?
Okay.
If it's a 3-year term, it'll be taxable year 3. The interest is taxable. Yep, the interest is taxable. For doing this? Okay, good question. Is there a cutoff date? The projection for us is that we want to open this by late winter, early spring of 2025. In order to do that, we have to immediately push with the general contractor, because if you know anything about contracting in this area, if you push pause once, it may be 2 years before you start over again. I mean, it's the supply and demand for materials, the permitting process. So we have to reasonably know that we can do this, or we have to go to the foundation to supplement that. So we've told the foundation we would be talking to them, I think, in June. So if you can at least let us know. We don't have to have the money by June, but we have to have the indication that you want to do this by June. But the sooner the better in terms of the planning for this. We're working with you individually. If you have a particular need, just let me know and we'll work with you individually.
Jonathan, I have a question.
Yep.
Back here.
Where are you?
Back here.
Okay.
I must have missed it, but do you know how many parking spots will be available in the Pleasant plan?
60.
Approximately 60.
60.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Plus a place to park for the volunteers until we build on the annex to this. So with the volunteer parking, we should get about 80 to 90 total, somewhere in there. Any other question?
So is this going to be run strictly by volunteers, or are we going to have some full-time staff?
Good question. In the material, you will see that there is a design for moderate number of staff, paid staff, which would include a manager, an assistant manager, probably someone that would be driving the truck, because it would be the driver not only drives the truck, but the driver has to be strong enough to help get the furniture in and out of the truck. So it's a good job employment opportunity. We also have committed in our budget from day one the support of our finance department here at the church, because you can't add a $2 million business onto this office without realizing that it's going to have a significant impact on the staff here. So we're already looking for a part-time person who will supplement that, and then that person will be dedicated to doing the finances for the Coleman Oaks eventually. We'll be using the same place of purchase. Mike, where's Mike? Place of purchase, right?
Yes, the point of sale.
Point of sale, thank you. We'll be using the same thing that Sober Mesa is using for our cash registers, cash outs, because that immediately interfaces with our existing software. So all of those things are being worked behind the scenes. Our finance team, our trustees are all working together to put all of this together. So it's an amazing, complicated process, but people are doing it well. Yep.
They sort. One, they have miscellaneous, and then they have a separate building for clothing. So they have three distinct elements to kind of filter through the process.
Okay.
How are you going to do that in one building?
Going to bring the guru here. She can. She was waiting for somebody to ask her. Thank you.
Welcome to Coleman Oaks. Obviously, the name is because of the location, and this property is surrounded by beautiful oak trees. So the concept we're trying to go for a little bit is Old Florida with a little touch of Key West, so we can have a little pop of color. The building itself, and I know this is very difficult to see, but later you can come up and look at it.
You have a rendering in your packet.
The front part of the building is the 5,000 square feet, and that will be the retail part of it. This corner right here is the coffee shop. And the coffee shop will have a separate entrance. It will have a screened-in front porch with little tables and chairs outside. There will also be tables and chairs inside. A very light menu, but we're thinking of little sandwiches, cookies, just very basic type of thing. One thing we will not have is a stove, because if you have a stove, you have to get the vent system and all that, so we're not going to go into that. The main entrance of the building is right here. On the front porch, it's very much the Cracker Barrel idea. We're going to have the rocking chairs out there for the guys who don't want to go shopping, or anybody else that wants to sit out there. And then the exit is going to be off of the side here. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're parked out front, you can come back out that front door, but our checkout counters are going to be over by the exit door. And that's to try to get a little bit of a flow through the store so that we don't have congestion as people are trying to come in and then you've got congestion there at your checkout counters. So the front part of it is the retail store. That is the same size as the main store at B&B. And then the back part of the building is the intake, and that will be 3,000 square feet. And that's the same size as the intake building at Bargains and Blessings. In the back, the entrance and the traffic flow will be so that you can drive around the building. There will be a canopy over the back where you would drop off your donations, and then you can come on back around and find your parking place if you wanted to stop and shop. The addition, as Jonathan said, will go off of this side, and that would be an additional 3,000 square feet. And we're configuring the inside so that we can break through a wall where the dressing rooms will be now and just go on into the new portion of the building. And as Jonathan mentioned, we're putting in the AC and the septic system and everything to accommodate that additional 3,000 square feet. Does that answer your question? Okay. It's going to be out here in this front corner. And the retention pond is in the back, and there have to be so many feet apart, you know how all that goes. And there have to be, I've learned more about gopher turtles and old growth trees and buffer systems and everything else of what we have to do, which is why the first property was not big enough. Once we got all the buffers and everything built in, there was no room left for a building. Yes?
Pray for the gopher turtles.
With the addition?
Not quite center.
No, the coffee shop will stay where it is, and the dressing rooms are kind of back in this area, and that's where we would open it up to go on into the new
But it'd be more center than
part of the building.
Yeah.
And then we talked about the community outreach program, and their office will be back here in the intake area, so it will be private. And we want to make sure that we show these people respect and dignity and don't talk to them out in front of the public. So that's why we've moved that office to the back.
That outreach ministry has really gotten a lot of resonance from our members, and we have a lot of people who already have volunteered. We have 2 people who've agreed to actually chair it, whose whole careers and lives were in public health. So, but they want to do some training because it's what the thrift shop can do to help them, but it's more what we can do to connect them with existing resources that we have connections with as our church in the larger community, so that they can get them up and running on their feet, and they don't have to keep coming back to Coleman Oaks every other week because they're in a different place than they were. So we don't want to just fix the symptom. We want to help them find a way to resolve it. And so we're going to need people to work in that. If that's where your heart is, let us know, and we'll connect you. So we'll start that training later this year.
Okay.
So there's one last thing I want to say about the building, and we'll come back to the questions. This is not just for people to sit out and have coffee. This is very intentional, as much as it was important to do that. This is all about relationships. We really believe, given where this is located, this is going to become a destination place. People will come here just for coffee and to sit, because there are people who don't have family, they don't have relationships, and they will come. And there will be a lot of volunteers that will come that aren't part of Lake Deaton or any other church. They're just people from the villages who come down and don't have any faith community, but they have a heart to serve, and they're going to want to serve. Can you imagine people sitting together having a cup of coffee on here, and what can happen as a result of that in terms of the connection with God and with one another? And we also plan that when the door is closed each day for thrift shop, this building doesn't shut down. That this open space can be used for support groups or special Bible studies. There's a huge Hispanic community not far from there, and there's just a vision for that, people meeting there. And using the coffee shop then as a place of hospitality. You know, let's have some coffee and sit and talk. And it's a beautiful place for what we call fresh expressions. Anybody familiar with that term? It's a place where you bring the church to the people, and you create a faith community kind of right there. There's all kinds of potential. This is where my heart is. there's all kinds of potential here for relationships. Sandy?
Yes, I was wondering, do you know what happens at Bargains and Blessings with their overflow?
What happens to it?
Yeah. You were saying
Overflow.
that
Number of agencies that we will be connecting with that take, for example, the clothing is sorted, and we pick what we want to put into the store. There's kind of another level that maybe is not as good as what we'd like in the store, but still usable. And there are various charities. B&B donates a lot to the Wildwood Methodist Church, and they have what they call the cottage, and people can come in and get clothing free. And so much of that comes from Bargains and Blessings. And then anything that is too damaged, torn, stained, whatever, there are companies that will buy it to make rags. And so we'll be connecting with a lot of resources like that. Recycling, we can recycle metal things that we don't want to sell, but there's metal that we can recycle. So we'll have a list of those and be able to contact, but we try to avoid throwing away as much as possible. We don't want to fill dumpsters. We want to be able to use as much of the donations as we possibly can. One thing that we are committed to is that we will not turn anything away. We'll take whatever is brought in and we will then process it appropriately because we want to respect the donors. We don't want people to come in and say, oh, well, we don't take that or we don't take that. We'll work that out.
So do you try to repair any clothing that maybe just needs sewn, or you just...
To do what? I'm sorry.
Repair.
If
repair?
anything needs repaired, do you repair 'em,
It's
or
interesting because some of the volunteers literally will take clothing home and sew on a button, fix a zipper. That does happen. And they often will take home something that they feel is just a stain that they could just wash it and bring it back. And that does happen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good
Thank
question.
you.
So to honor time, we're gonna come to a close here, and but we'll stay around. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, there is a sheet like this on your table. It basically gives you an opportunity to say, I like some time, either personal, one-on-one, or to be in a smaller group, so that I can explore this in more detail. It just helps us to know if you need more than what we're giving you here today. You can leave this on the table, you find this and leave it on the table, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Jim?
I want to invite, as we finish up our time, I want to invite you to take out the card that everybody has in their thing. So this last fall, we had the very first, we had a small group meeting because we needed to secure the money to purchase the property. And so we had a small group. We actually met with like 10 couples from the church, or actually it was 6 couples, I think, from the church, or individuals or couples. And we presented with them basically all the stuff we presented today. From that, we actually helped grow into, it was a much longer meeting. But it was during the course of that meeting, somebody said, I love this because it's all about a legacy. That we're doing something that's providing a legacy that's going to potentially impact people for years and generations to come. And what was funny was we had that meeting, so I had that thing of legacy on my mind, and just like 2 days later, our stewardship team at the church had an online training session that the United Methodist Church puts, and so all of our stewardship people were there. And at that meeting, they were talking about all sorts of things on stewardship and how to do it and grow that in our church. But they were talking about endowments, and they were sharing the fact that churches should really look at endowments, and that it takes a lot of work to even like raise $1 million for an endowment. But they say, if you do all that work and get that endowment, and for $1 million, you could have like $20,000, $30,000 of interest each year that you have to do ministry, and that you're providing a legacy. And as the trainer was talking about that, I thought, oh my gosh, and it's what Kevin said. of leveraging. I thought, we're doing something that we're investing, so we're going to get the money back. And Lloyd and I are at a place, we're still looking at retirement. We're investing, and I'll just let you know, we will take our whole money back at the end. We need it. We need it. It goes into our investment for retirement. And so we're investing, and we're going to get it back. But we can invest with money that we could get back. And you talk about a legacy. When the first time I was there almost 10 years ago now, when two guys came to Pastor Harold and myself and a couple others at New Covenant to talk about what became Bargains and Blessings. And they showed us what thrift stores make. And they showed us this one. They had all these things. In fact, they said everyone we talked to, they gave us their profits, what they're making. And they had this one on a list that was like 2 blocks from where we live in Wildwood. And I literally thought it had been a junkyard. I thought there was a junkyard over on the corner of 301 and right in front of that nursery over there on Powell Road where it goes out and it's 301. And they said that this place that was open like 3 days a week made like $275,000 the year before. And I thought, no, that can't be right. That's a junkyard there. So that day I left the meeting. I was driving home and I went a little different way to drive by there. And I pulled in, and sure enough, that junkyard was a thrift store that was open. It's now gone. In fact, yesterday I drove by there, totally clearing the lot. It said new gas stations going in. And I thought, this thrift store that looked like a junkyard was actually owned by a church and being open 3 days a week, and actually it wasn't a full day 3 days a week. They were making like $300,000 a year. And let me tell you, it came to me where we were in Tallahassee for 12 years. Until that day, I'd never thought about thrift stores, other than, have been to a couple, but and shopped at them. That's all I'd ever thought about them. But in Tallahassee, the church I was at, about a mile from us was another church that had a thrift store. And it was a good, well-run thrift store, like Bargains and Blessings, like Coleman Oaks is going to be. And it was always busy. In fact, our youngest son went there every Tuesday because this thrift store on Tuesdays had like dollar shirts or 50-cent shirts, dollar pants. And he bought his clothes there on Tuesdays. And I realized that thrift store, when I was in Tallahassee, had already been there 15, 20 years. It's still there to this day, which has now been another 20 years. It's about legacy. That thrift store, I'd never thought of it before, but it has to be making hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million a year. And it's generating ministry that's impacting people potentially all over the world. I don't know what their church does with their money, but I know what we're going to do with it. And so my prayer is that we as a congregation are going to step forward and invest in this, that we won't ever have to go. We have the foundation. We've talked to the foundation. They've said if we need to borrow money, they'll loan us the money. I don't want us to do that. My prayer is that we as a congregation can invest in this, and so we don't ever have to go anyplace else. And we're going to do it in the next 2 months because we need to do it to continue the progress. And we are leveraging that investment to produce a legacy that potentially can be impacting people for the next 30, 40 years. Who knows? Even if it did it 10 years, it would have a kingdom impact. And so that's where we want to invite you all to take your cards. Some of you may be ready, like Jonathan said today. You've already been thinking about it, praying about it, knew what you were coming to. But take your cards. If you're not ready today, pray about it. Make sure you fill it out correctly. I'm learning that. So if you're taking it from a trust, you have to make sure you have your title and all the stuff, or if whatever. And Jonathan and others can work with you on that. Decide if you want to do a 2 or 3 or 4 year. If you're looking at doing it and doing it for the maximum impact, we do request the 4 year. because it gives us more time to pay it back. But maybe you need to reinvest or different things like that. You can do the 2-year. But can we get the picture back up? Jonathan made it's this. I've been to 2 different meetings that somebody said, well, just give us an amount. Give us an amount that everybody in the church, like if everybody gives $5,000 or if everybody gives $10,000 or whatever, or invest $5,000 or $10,000. And here's the realization. Lloyd and I can't give what others can give, but we faithfully looked at what we can give, and that's what we're giving. Others can give more and can invest more. Others can invest less. So the thing is if everybody's faithful to invest, it all comes together. It will all come together. So the key is to look and say, what can we faithfully invest in this? That we're going to get back in 2, 3, 4 years, but what can we faithfully invest and to make this happen? And if everybody does that, I'm convinced with just 40 people where we're already at, I'm convinced that it's going to be a whole lot less than 348 people to take to get the money. And as soon as we got all the money, we're going to stop taking it because this is just to get it done. And so I want to encourage you to do that. And I also want to encourage you, if you need more information, if you want to talk, Jonathan and I will come and talk to you one-on-one. We'll come to a small group. Maybe you have a small group you want us to come talk to or anything like that. Jan will come. We'll answer any questions you have and work with you however we need to work with you. So we'll be here afterwards. I'm going to close out our time to be faithful to everybody's time.
Right before you pray, just to mention that on the website there is a thrift shop page, and we'll have regular updates there. In the corner, in the lobby, over by Silver Mesa, there's a corner there that also has updates. And if you take your phone and get the QR code, it'll take you right to the website. And so you can see what the updates are. So it'll be there for you.
Let's pray. Lord God, we thank you for everyone here today. And pray, as we've been praying, Lord, one of the prayers we made 4 years ago when we started our visioning process is to expand our territory. And this, Lord, is an expansion of territory. It's taking us and giving us the ability to connect with more people locally in ministry, but then also resources to bless people all over the whole world. So, Lord, as you've called us into this, and it's been confirmed in our leadership and in a church vote, Lord, help us now as a congregation to respond and to be all in to this opportunity you've given us, and to invest and to continue to grow your ministry and leverage our investments to bless literally, potentially hundreds of thousands more in the years to come. Today, be with us and just give us your peace and your grace as we go from this place. In Christ's name, amen. Thank you all.